right, so it's the What Happened to Music podcast. Apparently, Joe wants to talk about live sound guys.
Okay, so if you play in any kind of live group and you give gigs substantially, you will obviously encounter people who do sound. Some bands are fortunate enough to have a dedicated sound guy, but unfortunately, with the way the music scene is, and there's a lack of money for the bands in the first
Yeah,
place.
it's
You're probably gonna have whoever the venue has, if anybody.
I find some of the better cover bands will have their live sound guy, but
Yeah.
it's another it's another person to split.
Yeah,
split
and,
the check
and
with.
like bands I've worked with personally, we've only had a live sound guy if it was like a really high end gig.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the issue you end up running into is there's some gigs where it's like, okay, this is a live sound guy situation, and then this is use whoever they give you.
So the question is, why are there so many live sound guys who don't do a good job? So we're talking the band's sound being completely unbalanced, like drums crashing loud, lead guitar being way louder than the singer. I'm talking there's people on stage with microphones who you can't hear at all because they're not even turned on. I'm talking feedback throughout the show. Even at venues where you don't think that would be an issue, apparently it somehow is. Just stuff like that. And ideally, I'm not a sound technician. John just got a job in that, so he might be able to talk more.
Not really.
But ideally, your live sound guy will be there. He'll help set you up. And then throughout the show, if there's an issue, he'll fix it as you go.
I think what you end up running into is there's plenty of good live sound guys
Right.
who work at better venues. The real issue is it's a very difficult job because there's so many factors that can go wrong. So just, at the heart of it, and it's a timed issue. So if all of a sudden you're in a group and things aren't working, you have to do that troubleshooting in a couple of minutes. So overall, and I think a lot of sound guys do a pretty good job. I think you definitely have a situation where you have people that have no clue, honestly, what they're doing, other than I move things and set things up, and no one's talking about compression ratios and things like that. I know Sean Eldridge always had an issue whenever he would bring his because in certain death metal situations he would have a trigger set up.
Yeah.
And there was a point where he was using a completely just electronic kick. And there would be sound guys that are like, I don't know how to hook this up. So eventually he was like, okay, well, I'm going to show you how to put it into like a direct box or something like that. Because he needed to know, because it was that much of an issue of, I don't know how to do this. And I have to imagine, especially, not every band has a horn section.
Yeah.
So, and I think that's the big issue that you probably run into the most, where all of a sudden it's like, I don't know what to do with this instrument.
But even, I won't mention specific venues by name. There have been venues I've played where you're like, oh, horn section, they're used to that because that's the kind of music that goes there. And no, like the one band I play in has a flute player. He's been not turned on at multiple places like that. Horns would be too loud. You wouldn't be able to hear them. The biggest horror story I have was from a gig we did a few weeks ago, and sound guys were terrible. They refused to sound check us because they wanted to sound check their friends instead, who decided that they were magically going to be on our stage all of a sudden when they weren't supposed to be. So they did that. The majority of those sound guys standing around the whole time, just like, oh.
I don't know.
When it started, everything was way too loud. There was feedback constantly the entire performance. It sounded like a big garbled mess on stage and off stage. Apparently our band leader kept going over to them, trying to tell them to fix things, and they kind of just kept giving them looks. And then apparently he had a conversation with them, and they said, we're not getting paid enough to do this show. You get what you pay for. So
I feel that
you just gave a terrible product, which, we could talk about. I'm sure it is difficult to run live sound. And like John said, there's a lot of real time factors. You have to solve a problem like that. But to say something like that is like me as a person is a garbage product. I'm proud to announce that to you. So it's like, why would anyone ever hire you ever again? Because you've just announced, unless you're being paid an astronomical fee, you're not even going to try.
Yeah, I mean, apathy is certainly a problem, and I think it's like probably any it's like any sort of thing you could do where eventually you get burned out, where it's like, yep, another punk band in tonight, all right, and then you no longer have the interest in it.
Yeah.
Well, now let me ask you a question: would you rather have good on-stage sound or good off-stage sound if you had to choose one, or which is the bigger hindrance?
I mean, good offstage sound always. That's your band's product. That's what people see unless they're in the band. I've lost track of how many shows I had no idea what I was playing. You have muscle memory, but that only goes so far. Especially if you get in a band where there's more improvised lines, like you kind of lose that, so you kind of stick to what's safe.
Yeah, well,
but I would rather the audience be like, "Oh, that sounded really good."
It's interesting because it reminds me when you were talking about bad onstage sound. Because I used to, in my rock and roll days, you play like church basement shows. I remember it was a church in Tom's River, and we played it once before. And usually these are like, let's throw up, two speakers. Throw up two speakers just so for the vocalist. Yeah. Nothing else is mic'd up, and it usually kind of works because the band kind of ends up doing their own sound. And everyone who's ever played those kind of shows knows what I'm talking about. It's like, okay, well, the amps are as loud as the drums, and the vocalist is now loud, so you can work with the sound. And I remember they ended up bringing in, like the second time, I was like, oh, look at this, they have floor monitors. Oh wow, this is great. And I'm like playing my guitar going, oh, this is incredible. I can hear myself so clearly through this floor monitor. And I remember the first note, I just saw the drummer moving, and I couldn't hear one thing that was being played, to the point where I'm going, oh man, oh man, oh man. I'm like listening, the drummer is off by like a measure and a half.
Yeah.
So I'm hearing just myself and the vocalist, and then to your credit with bad live sound, I'm like, I need these monitors turned down. And like, I mean, it was a church basement show. The guy like didn't know what he was doing, and it was like the entire show was like, it was like a 45-minute set.
Yeah.
We had covers that were completely botched. I mean, it was awful. It was probably the worst show I've ever played. Other than the time then, it was a song in drop D, and the other guitarist forgot to switch his guitar and played it in standard. So it was a major second. I think it was the entire time. I think it was like a Sepultura.
Lovely.
It was a Sepultura cover.
I mean, it could have been a minor second. That would have been worse.
It was weird. I just remember thinking that was a bad mistake. But no,
so
that is interesting. On stage to off stage sound.
So live sound guys, I've had a lot of bad experiences. Unfortunately, I've had good ones. I've had bad ones. I'm not well versed in live sound. I've done courses on studio mixing, but not necessarily live sound. So if you have expertise in the topic, why it would be difficult, why it shouldn't be difficult.
Yeah, let us know. If you run live sound, let us know your biggest issues. Tell us. And let us know in terms of just musicians, things that people do that just irk you.
Things that like I would do if you mention it. Like, oh yeah, I should do this to help the guy out a little bit more.
Yeah, exactly. Or just, I mean, because I think that really helps them out.
Yeah.